Hello, I'm Rachel Gilmore, your least favorite person's least favorite journalist. Welcome to Bubble Pop. It's the weekly show where we talk about some of the biggest headlines and juiciest news tidbits so you don't have to doom scroll. And for season 2, as you can tell by me immediately stumbling on my words, we're doing it live, baby. So just a reminder that if you want to support the show, you can subscribe on Patreon, Substack, and YouTube, as well as wherever you like to listen. You can also use the super chat function on YouTube while we're live to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the episode, provided they're not inappropriate. Now let's pop your bubble. Today we're talking about far-right extremism, from those weird little fight clubs to attempts to repackage mass deportations using more politically palatable language. And to help me do it, we're chatting with one of the country's foremost experts in far-right extremism. Evan Balgord is the executive director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, one of the country's top nonprofits that exposes hate and extremism. Evan, welcome.
Hi, Rachel. Feels like there's not that much going on this week, huh?
I know, it's so boring and slow. Yeah. Well, thank you for being my guinea pig for my first ever live episode. It's very exciting.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we have some pretty chilling exclusive audio from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network that we will be reacting to live during this episode. It's from some extremist Twitter spaces where they really revealed a lot. These guys aren't as slick as they think they are, so this audio is pretty revealing in my opinion. But before we touch on that, I want to set the scene for our listeners. So as a very basic first question, Evan, can you give us a sense of the far-right extremist landscape in Canada? Like, who is it, what is it, and how has it shifted in recent months and years?
Sure. So I've been following this for about 10 years. The organization's been around for almost 8 years now, and a lot's changed in that time. And I think the biggest new change that I can think of is the kind of unification or consolidation of white nationalists in Canada. So there used to be all sorts of groups, all sorts of names. There would be a lot of infighting. Groups would pop up, go defunct. People would move between groups. That was the natural state of affairs. And over the last year or so, that's kind of changed. So I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers know about Diagolon. But this is a collection of streamers that popped up many years ago. And they would look at news of the day and give, racist and anti-Semitic reactions to it. And when they were doing this, they built an audience, and some of their streams will have views in the tens of thousands. They weren't content just to do that. They started up a more militant branch they called Second Sons Canada now, that's doing training led by veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces. And Second Sons Canada is part of the broader Active Club network, which are these more militant groups of white nationalists and sometimes neo-Nazis who get together to train, do fitness, but also to do mixed martial arts. And more recently, there's been another organization that's popped up that's federally incorporated called the Dominion Society of Canada. And now they're like the political wing. So if Diagolon is content creators, propaganda, Second Son Canada is the militant wing, and the Dominion Society of Canada is the political wing. And they lay out their agenda quite clearly that they want to criticize and cajole the Conservative Party of Canada so that their people, and this is them saying it, not me making a wild allegation, they're saying it, so that their people on the inside of the Conservative Party of Canada can use the space that they create. They really want them to adopt a more racist immigration platform as like the main platform, the Conservative Party of Canada. So the white nationalist movement in Canada, larger than it's ever been, has a militant wing with chapters across the country, and has a specific political agenda. So this white nationalist movement, this is that's not all of the far right. There's still the convoy types who are, waiting to be engaged. Some of them are doing like political workshops and targeting local races, like trying to become like school board trustees and city councilors. So there's still the broader far right movement that's going on. But the big change is the unification of the white nationalist movement.
Wow. Yeah, it's startling. Last time I had you on, we were talking about all of this, and it's fascinating to see how even in the months since your last appearance on Bubble Pop, there's been even more of a shift. And one of those is what you mentioned about the growing offline organization, specifically with respect to these active clubs. So we're going to touch on the Dominion Society and the remigration sort of political arm, and the audio that proves what you were just saying. But before we do that, can you tell our listeners about this more militant arm? Like, what is an active club?
Right. So an active club is, you can think of like different variations of white nationalism. It's how the white nationalists talk about this themselves. They'll say like white nationalism 1.0 was what you think about when you think of like your daddies or your granddaddies, like skinhead Nazis, right? Boneheads. White nationalism 2.0 was the alt-right movement. So it was these extremely online young men who would create memes, really galvanized around Gamergate and the presidency of Donald Trump. And it sort of culminated in Charlottesville. Many of the figures that are now associated with the alt-right they've certainly already sort of had their day in the sun, and they're on the wane, right? Like a lot of the more prominent figures like Richard Spencer and stuff aren't popular or really that influential anymore. And also seen as very cringe, extremely online, seen like they're not serious. They don't go out in the real world and do stuff. So that's when we got to white nationalism 3.0 and the active clubs. It was a response to the alt-right. And the idea was, we're going to get people offline. We're going to meet up in person, and we're going to start training and preparing and still advancing kind of the same political agenda where they want to have their white ethno state, majority, super majority white population countries and what have you. The active club model is now pretty popular across the United States, Canada, and Europe, where they are a bit more close-knit, a bit more careful about how they recruit. And they'll go into the woods and do training. Sometimes that training is more militant. Sometimes it's more on the side of like a bunch of guys getting together to punch each other in shorts, like doing MMA stuff. Yeah.
That's so embarrassing.
It is a little embarrassing. But the problem is, of course, when it's not funny anymore. Well, we've seen groups following the active club models who are also based off of more militant neo-Nazi organizing elsewhere. That has been violence. So, there's certainly a celebration and glorification of violence. And sometimes it's more than just these guys punching each other in shorts, right?
Right. And we saw an example of, one of these active clubs doing sort of a public demonstration. Diagolon, who, I think we both remember, as you already mentioned, when they were just claiming to be comedians and live streamers. And but they gathered in, and I'll pull up an article for anyone watching on video to take a peek at here. They gathered in the Niagara area to do this sort of offline offline display of force and numbers, where they just yelled a bunch of stuff and did these sort of pseudo military drills. So what's going on there? Like, what has changed within Diagolon to go from this sort of online live streamer, pretending to just be comedians and telling you it's a meme whenever you suggested something more serious, to them taking it clearly much more seriously and trying to do these intimidating gatherings in public?
So the whole "we're just comedians, it's just a meme" thing, in my opinion, that was never really true, right? When you watch the streams, I don't know what kind of humor appeals to different kind of people, but I take Jeremy McKenzie at face value when he says, horrifically racist things and anti-Semitic things, right? I take him at face value when he does those things. Or when he yells "gun or rope" when he is talking about his perceived political enemies, right?
Wow.
There is not a world in which presenting yourself like that to this audience is a joke. In terms of like, when did they get expressly political? Hard to say. We know during their tour across the country, I believe there was like a leaked audio clip or something of one of their meetings where I think it was Derek, who's another one of their live streamers, thank you for popping that up, was talking about how, it started as a joke, but now it's not a joke because they realize that they're being discussed politically by political people. So at what point they decided that that's what they want to do, I don't know. If I do want to speculate, though, as to why they're becoming more emboldened, Jeremy was facing a slew of charges, of which I think almost all or all of them were dropped or dismissed or what have you. I'm not going to get the legal language exactly right while we're live, but all of the charges, to the best of my recollection, have gone away. And I saw Jeremy after that period of time. I think that was emboldening. I think after years of realizing that they're not facing very significant opposition, but also that they're not facing sort of any legal consequences, and the government isn't paying them the attention that perhaps it should. I think that they've become emboldened because of the lack of resistance, but I also think that they're getting overconfident for a number of reasons, and that their belief that there will be no consequences will be tested.
Interesting. So that's sort of the more militant side of things, right? But as you mentioned, there's also this sort of growing political side. And I have to say, this has really struck me. And I know that you guys have been preoccupied with this at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. You published a really great piece recently on this question, which is the language of remigration being used to sort of normalize some of this far-right rhetoric in the mainstream. It actually seems to be, unfortunately, working in some countries, like in the US and in Europe as well. Why do you think that is? Why is this such an effective tactic?
Like remigration, the concept is nothing new. The word may be newer, but the concept's nothing new. And I think before we delve like exactly what remigration is, I think we have to, right? So remigration being the idea that stopping immigration isn't enough, that in order to, preserve a culture or identity of a country, you need to send people back. People who've migrated, they're back to wherever they are, right, in order to create the country that you want. And I'm using very gentle language about it, but like what we're talking about is people who want countries like Canada to be white and European. A bunch of things we could talk about there. Very little are they thinking about Indigenous folks who were here for generations previously.
No, they literally say on their website. Yeah, they literally say on their website that they want to establish a sort of national identity predicated around being a biculture, I think they said, or of English and French people, and a Christian nation. Like it's very interesting.
How they think it should be like 97% like white heritage Canadian or something like that. So
is that the Dominion Society, or is that the movement more broadly?
I believe again, because we're live, it's very hard for me to check my notes.
Yeah, well, maybe just to be safe.
Jeremy, I believe actually that's a recent Jeremy stream where he was saying his ideal thing was like 97%.
Okay. And just to give the listeners a little more context, because I was sort of diving in deep before we before we went over the definition, I've got some screenshots here from the actual Dominion Society, which is the organization pushing the remigration movement in Canada. This is from their website, saying that the phase 2 of their plan is to remove the illegitimate population, which they describe as achieving through the revocation of permanent residency, as well as mass deportations, which includes, a removal operation is how they word it, targeting all temporary foreign workers, permanent residents, illegal migrants, holders of expiring temporary visas as well. And then the third phase of this second phase is a voluntary repatriation program, is what they call it, which is where they want to establish a federal program for citizens to renounce their Canadian citizenship and return to their country of origin. They want to incentivize this, and they claim it will be promoted as a, quote, peaceful, non-punitive option for individuals with weak ties to Canada or enduring identification with their country of origin. So, yeah, I mean, Evan, is that sort of textbook remigration there as we're seeing it
Yeah.
around the world?
So, I mean, Greg Wycliffe, who's one of the leaders, one of the co-founders of the Dominion Society of Canada, I believe, according to their incorporation paperwork, he has sort of said like racism is good and racism works because in certain times and places, people who advocate for remigration are talking about making conditions for people who are not white and European bad, like discriminating against them so that they want to leave. And none of this is new, right? Like a very brief and simple history lesson. Before we got to the Holocaust, Nazi Germany tried its best to get rid of their Jewish population by other ways, right? So Eichmann, who would later become known as I believe he was the one who was become known as the architect of the Holocaust. He first created this office where previously in the German administration in Nazi Germany, they had all these different offices that would have to process like the emigration of a Jewish person. And they brought them all together so that a Jewish person could start at like one side of the office and all the paperwork be done and then leave. And of course, during all of this, they were dispossessing Jews of their property and taking everything that they had, and in fact had to pay to leave. That's my understanding of it as well. But Eichmann will also go around and threaten and harass the Jewish community, sometimes freezing their bank accounts, unfreezing their bank accounts, setting quotas on them and saying, oh, things are going to be especially really bad for you if you're not convincing your own members of the Jewish community to leave. So that's when we're talking about remigration, the what then question. And the Dominion Society touched on some of it, right? Okay, so you're ending, you're cutting off immigration, and that's not enough for you because, your goal is to create this super majority of white European people. So that's not enough. So what then, right? So they're talking about finding ways to take away people's citizenship. If that's not enough for you, what then? If that's not enough for you, what then? And like, how quickly are we getting into forced mass deportations? And how do we make forced mass deportations happen when people live in communities? You have to round them up and put them in concentration camps in order to force mass deport them. And where do we go from there, right? And we can see some of this happening in the United States right now. And historically, we know where this goes. Canada is a country a bit over 150 years old. 2 people ago, Canada did not exist. Canada is a country of immigrants who have come where Indigenous folks lived and genocided them. And now it's on all of us to make this work as a multicultural and pluralistic society. And we can, right? That's my big existential gripe with these kind of white nationalists is why do they fatalistically think that multiculturalism can't work when like it's them who are the barrier to shit like this working? If we actually pulled together and found ways to live in a multicultural society, which, is a bit of an experiment and we are figuring it out, but it is a wonderful experiment to be in. It's a wonderful place to be in. And I think we could all be working towards it. I don't believe in their fatalism that, multiculturalism is a bad thing and should be ended.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion that's rooted in them seeming to require the sense of identity they get by virtue of the privilege granted to them because of the skin that they were born in a society that is in so many ways racist. So it's very sad to define yourself so entirely by something that you didn't earn and use it to discriminate against others. So I feel like that was a pretty great overview of this concept. Now, the actual Dominion Society, I did want to ask you about what its sort of ties are, because it's doing this more political thing where its members are claiming to have access to politicians, but it's also reposting, like the founder is reposting guys like Alex Vrend from Diagolon and telling people to follow, the accounts that he creates in between suspensions and giving that individual the number 88 for his membership. And for those of you who don't know, that in extreme right wing and white nationalist circles is a dog whistle for HH, for Heil Hitler, because H is the eighth letter of the alphabet. So 88. Yeah. So are these guys doing a good job of pretending to be politically palatable? And could it succeed regardless of that?
I think they're going too fast, too far. I think it's going to bite them in the ass. So when it comes to Daniel Tyree and the Dominion Society, they're also like openly retweeting or saying thank you or whatever to people who have just obviously Nazi handles on social media.
Yes.
They have also explicitly said that they will not counter signal. And for those of you who might not know what that word means, it basically means like denounce, say anything bad about. So they've also said in their in one of their spaces, I believe, one of their spaces chats, they said they wouldn't counter signal anybody who was making neo-Nazi expressions, right? They've made it clear where they sort of stand on that and where they stand in the ecosystem. They believe they need to be a political face, but they really want to push things as far as they can to continue to push the Overton window, the idea of what's acceptable in mainstream discourse. And in terms of the relationship with Diagolon and Second Sons Canada, so I believe it was recently Jeremy and Vren say they are now pulling salaries from Second Sons Canada, which is interesting because I'm not sure how they're incorporated. We'll find out. But they've talked about how Daniel Tyree and the Dominion Society of Canada is now going to kind of take over their political operations as the White Nationalist Network. So when you're asking about like what is the linkage, these are three arms of the same organization as far as we're concerned.
It's so funny. Canada's telecoms companies are, three major companies in a trench coat, and our grocery stores, and even our white nationalist groups. It's like, come on, guys.
It's like the Walmart. Yeah, Diagolon has become the Walmart of white nationalism. They've sort of bullied anybody else out of the space or sort of taken it over. Even the active club networks, which predates Second Sons by a little bit, they're all cozy with. There's one large white nationalist network in Canada, and it's Diagolon.
Wow, that's really concerning, because that seems like a level of organization that maybe doesn't necessarily exist in some other countries to the same degree, because they have this more disparate network. It leads to a lot of infighting.
It is pretty unique. It's also could be a tactical mistake on their part, because the white nationalists and neo-Nazis historically, right, have always talked about having smaller groups or having a movement, because it's harder to target them with like legal stuff. If they're not a card carrying group, if they have, if there's a bunch of them in different places, right? The white nationalist movement all coming under one umbrella is almost a challenge to law enforcement and the government, being like, this is really low hanging fruit. If you guys can't accomplish this, what are you even doing?
Yeah. So I've got some clips that you guys at the Canadian Anti-Hate Network obtained, and I want to play them for our listeners, and we're going to react to them. And so there's two clips, but they're sort of similar in nature. But for the first one, it is this user Offman on X speaking. Can you just tell the audience who that is and where they're speaking, like, so that they understand the context of it?
So allegedly, this individual has already been identified by some. I don't know who made the original identification off the top of my head, but allegedly this individual has been identified, and both in the spaces and it correlates with this supposed identification. They claim to have previously worked in a political capacity for the Conservative Party of British Columbia. They claim to be connected with the Conservative Party of Canada, and they also make claims to have done some work kind of surrounding the White House. Now, I think a couple important things to note here. People who work in politics tend to be braggadocious, right? Tend to overinflate their sense of importance. So we shouldn't necessarily take this person saying how much influence they have. We shouldn't necessarily take that at face value. However, I do believe part of it And I would say that perhaps it's in the clips we're going to be listening to, but he claims to have insider knowledge from the Conservative Party of Canada, claims to know that the Conservative Party of Canada is going to like make some upcoming changes to MPs being allowed to talk about immigration and a new immigration policy. And they made those claims just a few days before exactly that happened, right? So did they just hear some rumors that plenty of other people could have had, or do they actually have the connections that they claim to have? I can't say definitively, but there's some smoke here, right? And it's also a question of the Conservative Party of Canada. These people say really nasty things about you as well. And, you know, are there people in your party that you need to be watching out for who, you know, agree with this kind of stuff? It's a good question for them. So yeah, that's the context of like who's one of the guys who's talking in the clip. So it's that guy, and then it's Daniel Tyree, who's the founder of the Dominion Society of Canada.
Yeah, so we'll play the first clip and maybe quickly chat about it, and then I'll play the Daniel Tyree clip. But yeah, so here is the Othman on X speaking about, well, bragging about his sort of agenda and, you know, his success in trying to share that agenda politically.
I've seen a little bit of disappointing things from the Politico side, because I know that some of these guys are playing rhetorical obfuscation. A lot of them agree with us. For example, this morning I spoke to a really senior advisor to Pierre Poilievre, and he said that it took him all hell's work to convince Pierre to finally take up anti-immigration stances, and that's happening. You'll notice that the CPC caucus, members of parliament today, have begun posting, I think even yesterday, began posting anti-immigration rhetoric because they've finally gotten permission to. In particular, there was Michelle Rampal-Garnier, I think her name is, and Aaron Gunn from BC. And Michelle is, I believe, an Alberta MP. So there is legitimate hope for political solutions.
So Michelle Rampal-Garnier is apparently French now. I know that's not the point of the clip, but that really got me, you know, for a guy pretending to know all this stuff about the party. Doesn't even know she's very much not French. But yeah, what did you think when you first heard him making those claims?
It's tough, you know, because we have to do this work. We're genuinely a nonpartisan organization. To be clear about what that means is that, you know, we do not support or work for or take direction from any particular political party. So the question that poses is, I would like to have conversations in good faith with conservatives who do not agree with Othman and Mr. Tyree. And I think that there may be space to do so, but you can clearly see how, you know, if what he is saying is true, how the Conservative Party has a bit of a problem. In the more of the Spaces clip later, I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but he specifically calls out some people by name who do not agree with him in the Conservative Party of Canada. So I do just want to be clear on this as well, that like this is not representing all conservatives, but it's concerning that he feels that he has an in to the closest halls of power there.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of which, this next clip is the founder of the Dominion Society, Daniel Tyree, sort of making similar claims and discussing tactics. He seems to disagree slightly with Othman about the kinds of tactics they should be using, but largely they are sharing the same goals from the sounds of it. It's a bit of a longer clip. It's about 2 minutes. But yeah, let's give it a listen.
Yeah, exactly. Like I come from a similar background. I've done this whole song and dance, and I agree. There's definitely our guys on the inside that are obfuscating their message, but like we're so far beyond that. Like the situation in Canada is fucked. It's not. We're not going to win by just like being silent and being like, oh, leave this up to our guys on the inside. Those guys often get they start getting worried about losing their job if they speak out. They have their own interests, and they end up getting shuffled into comfortable positions and accomplishing absolutely nothing, even though they might have based conversations with you behind the scenes. Like, that's not enough anymore, and that's also not what we're doing. We're straddling the divide between this quote unquote poster class and this quote unquote professional class to move our more radical, more correct position into the mainstream and put direct pressure on these guys. I am happy
I agree.
Trudeau
I definitely agree.
Poilievre is speaking out against immigration finally. He's still not doing so very effectively. He's still getting distracted by all sorts of other issues. And we're going to criticize him every single day until he does better and better and better. And keep in mind, we're not the ones that started fights with these professional class. And really, I didn't get that much blowback from those guys. I got blowback from Robin Skies, who's not working in politics anymore. I got blowback from Brian Burgett, who's a failed candidate for the Conservative Party of British Columbia. I got pushed back by Alex Brown. He's probably the closest we could throw into this professional politico class. If there are our guys on the inside, and I know there are, I talk to them, they're not the ones out here counter-signaling me because they realize that I'm pushing things in the right direction. The guys on this call are pushing things in the right direction. So we don't win by fighting with each other. We win by them ignoring us and letting us push the Overton window while they take advantage of the space we create.
Yep.
So there you have it. I mean, first thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really helpful that they lay it out.
I know.
Blatantly.
It's like
makes
one of
it
those
easy as a
villains
journalist.
that does the monologue right before they like attack the good guy, and they detail their whole dastardly plan, and then the good guy's like, "Okay, well now I know exactly how to counter you."
Makes it so much easier to report on. Makes it so much easier to have conversations with people who matter about this stuff. A couple things I'll point out there, right? The term rhetorical obfuscation. What they're both arguing for here is the use of deceit in hiding their ultimate ends. But then they tell us they're doing it, which isn't particularly smart. The strategy being they're going to push very hard from the outside to try to make change on the inside of politics. And, Tyree's pointing out, they're not counter signaling me, the people that he claims to know sort of inside the political establishment of the Conservative Party of Canada. He is, again, he's claiming a tie there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned this earlier, him sort of highlighting that there are also people in the party who disagree with what they're doing. And I think it's a really important point, and it speaks to how these guys, as you mentioned, feel about these parties. They really seem to talk about them entirely as if they're using them. We heard the same thing from Diagolon when they were talking about considering using Pierre Poilievre. They never claimed to like him, but they would say, "Oh, I think he's such a weasel that we can use him." That was sort of how they spoke about him. So it's really disrespectful, and it is ultimately a very, very cynical politics too, where they want to take advantage of those who they claim are within the party who are willing to pretend not to have this more radical agenda in order to shift, as he says, the Overton window, which is the sort of the concept of what is allowed in polite political discourse, what is accepted political discourse in a society. They want to shift it in a direction where the kinds of policies that they want to see enacted are politically acceptable. And we're seeing that happen in the United States right now. I mean, that's the Overton window shift in action. And that was sort of the last thing that I wanted to touch on with you, which is Trump's executive order about Antifa, which effectively tries to quash something that is an ideology, a philosophy of anti-fascism, of basically opposing guys like what you just listened to. So I find that terrifying. And we're seeing the Canadian right wing try to use this moment too. So can we talk a little bit about that? I mean, how are you seeing that happen here at home?
Sure. So we are, I mean, I guess we're not the only nonprofit in Canada that would consider itself like anti-racist and anti-fascist, right? I think a lot of good-hearted nonprofits would consider themselves that. We are one of the only nonprofits in Canada that it's right on our About Us page. It's really funny. We're having hit articles written about us right now about like, oh, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network is Antifa. It's like, it's been on our About Us page for damn nearly 8 years. Wow, you really got us.
They oppose fascism. Oh my God.
Yeah. And like, what does that mean to us, right? I want to have a pluralistic and multicultural democracy. I want a world and I want a country where people, aren't harassed, threatened, or hurt because of, what their identity happens to be, the God they pray to, the skin color they have. Like, I don't want people to be hurt on that basis. I want a world where everybody can live in a just and inclusive society, where everybody has, economic opportunities. I want a fair country for everybody. And it's on that basis that I am anti-fascist, because that's the opposite of what fascists want. And when we're talking about who fascists are and what anti-fascism is, not everybody that we oppose, I would label capital F fascist, right? Yeah. When we're talking about doing anti-fascism, it also involves anti-racism. And generally speaking, it means that, we are reporting on, because we're an anti-fascist journalism organization primarily, but we're reporting on groups, movements, networks that harbor racism and other forms of hate and express that, and say and do things that are incompatible with a pluralistic and multicultural democracies. Like, that's what anti-fascism as an ideology is to us. And it's the idea that that the sort of racist and anti-democratic forces out there need to be stopped. And yes, you got me. I am anti-fascist. So we're seeing right now, though, multiple sort of smear pieces being written. We're seeing, there was a Conservative MP that challenged our funding in the House of Commons inaccurately, right? And
yeah, it was Rachel Thomas who at the Canadian Heritage Committee, and we just sort of, I think you and I both just saw this morning. It's Friday, September 26th. So, we're kind of jumping on this last second, but the gist of what she said was she claimed that you guys report on Catholics and people who identify as pro-life, which I think you can speak to why that's a misrepresentation completely of what of an aspect of a job posting. And she also said that you are furthering or spurring greater polarization and arguably hate in this country by choosing to pick on certain groups of people. So can you just respond to her claims? It was just so ridiculous.
Yeah. So let's talk about a second where it's coming from, because then I can debunk it. So where that's coming from is because we've done reporting on these kind of like paired organizations called Campaign Life Coalition and LifeSite News. And LifeSite News has published anti-Semitic content. It celebrated foreign laws which seek to punish gay people with the death penalty. It called on its readers to participate in the January 6th insurrection attempt. And according to the Institute for Strategic Dialogue's briefing paper on online domestic extremism in Canada, it's the second most linked to news site by their definition of Canadian domestic extremists. So we've reported on LifeSite News before for some of the far right positions that they have taken. And they've said that we are hating Catholics and people who are pro-life. That's not it. We report on Christian nationalists, and Christian nationalism is a belief that Canada and the United States are founded based on their rigid interpretations of Christian law. And these are the kind of Christians who, yes, they oppose women's right to health care. They oppose queer people being able to get married. They don't want references to healthy, happy queer relationships in schools or anywhere else in public life. In the United States, so I want to be very clear for legal purposes here. I want to be extremely clear that I'm not referring to CLC and LifeSite News here. I'm referring to Christian nationalism generally. Yeah. But in the United States, Christian nationalism and nationalists go further. They don't want women to be able to vote. Several of them do not want women to be able to say no to their husbands when it comes to sex. And what I mean is marital rape. They want to legalize marital rape. And so Christian nationalism is not all Catholics, and it's not even all people who are quote unquote pro-life. And I think that when LifeSite News and Campaign Life Coalition, or when this MP says that when we're reporting on Christian nationalism, we're actually reporting on Catholics, is slandering Catholics, right? Like, not all Catholics are that kind of right-wing extremist, and it's not fair to categorize them that way. And I'd go further to say, when LifeSite News is describing itself as Catholic, they also advance this this position, which is a belief that the Pope isn't actually the real Pope, which is a position that I understand some Catholics find heretical. So not even all Catholics would necessarily consider LifeSite News and Campaign Life Coalition to be Catholic if they hold that view. So that total misconception and how this organization describes itself. When we write something about LifeSite News or Campaign Life Coalition, within like 12 to 24 hours, we get a media request from Blacklocks. And for those of people who don't know, Blacklocks is this organization that reports on things going on Parliament Hill. But when I was a baby journalist, I thought they were really cool. I'm like, they're really going after people. They're filing all of these ATIP requests, then responding to media requests from them. In my opinion, it's in such bad faith, right? Like, in my opinion, they are like the Rebel News of reporting on Parliament Hill stuff. So they're the ones who recently reported that we target Catholics and people who are pro-life, which, again, as I have just described, is not true. But that was repeated now by this conservative MP in an attempt to target our funding. So, it's very frustrating. We've talked about this before, how, there's such a double standard that we hold ourselves to versus folks who are more far right leaning. How, the ethics that we follow, the legal vetting we do of our stories and things like that, the standards we hold ourselves to are quite high. And then when you're on the receiving end of it, it wasn't just Blacklocks now, it was Juno's writing a second article about us, trying to tie us to Antifa and this terrorist designation. But I made it extremely clear to them, and they had published it in their article, that, we have never endorsed, aided, or funded terrorism, violence, or criminal activity. In fact, in our 40 Ways guide, we explicitly say that we do not support that, and that's sort of our flagship learning material. And any allegation that we have is a lie. It is defamatory, and it's not true. And that's that. But we have to spend all day because of some of these far right actors, and it's not just the pseudo media outlets as well. But we have to spend all day just like correcting lies.
Yeah. What does it tell you about? I don't know. I feel like it's very revealing when something is clearly not accurate, and despite clarifications that something's not accurate, when individuals continue to publish or pursue attacks on your organization, the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, based on those bad faith attacks. What does that tell you about their motivations? I know you can only speculate and you don't know for a fact, but what do you think when you face these attacks? What does it tell you about your own work?
Yeah. So I'll speak generally to make it clear that I'm not specifically talking about LSN, CLC, Juno, or Blacklocks here. I'll just speak generally about the far right ecosystem. They don't like being reported on by us. Clearly, they see us as an obstacle to what they want to accomplish. And that is credit to our good work, in my opinion. And I think we have done good work, like nearly 700 articles, 8 years operating, shut down multiple neo-Nazi groups. I think we've done good work. And, it's a very similar motivation, I think, to why did Trump designate Antifa a terrorist organization? Well, first off, there's no one group that is Antifa, and the anti-fascist ideology doesn't have any sort of hierarchical leadership structure. There's no such thing as a card-carrying member. A group can consider itself an anti-fascist group and part of the anti-fascist movement. There's no gatekeeping there. And saying that the anti-fascist movement is violent is asinine. It's like saying the environmental movement is criminal because some people have shut down a pipeline somewhere else. It's like saying people who believe in democracy or consider themselves part of a pro-democracy movement are pro-violence because people have like done coups in order to establish a democratic government somewhere. It's like saying that the civil rights movement was violent because of the actions of the Black Panthers alone, and also getting half of your facts wrong about the Black Panthers. So, you're making statements about a very large and complex social movement with, multiple beliefs and groups that are part of it. So what is Trump doing when he designates Antifa, an entire ideology to be like a terrorist organization, is pretty simple. He's trying to scare people and use the weight of the U.S. government to crack down on the people who resist what his regime is trying to do to his critics, right? Like it is anti-democratic. It is fascist. It is simply trying to shut down dissent and clear a path for carrying out their ultimate goals. So yes, that is what the far-right movement in Canada is trying to do as well when it comes to leveraging or trying to leverage Trump's Antifa designation. They're trying to clear their opposition of their path so that they can enact their racist agenda, including of which, as we talked about, is, the mass deportation of people. And here I am quoting Daniel Tyree, who are not, quote, white heritage Canadians.
It's the hypocrisy of it always just makes me, I mean, I was on Rideau Street during the convoy hearing people yell about freedom. And it's kind of shocking to me. I mean, it's not. I wish it was shocking to me. But the hypocrisy is quite stunning to be comfortable with this while claiming to speak for freedom. Being fine with these bad faith attacks on critics of your ideology while claiming to stand for freedom. It's so frustrating and belies, I think, a lot of the true natures of these sorts of ideologies, which is that they're not about freedom, like they like to say, or anything of the sort. They're actually just about consolidation of power to enact their specific, often quite unpleasant and hateful agendas. So I don't know. It's pretty ridiculous. All right, Evan, I think that's all the questions that I had for you today. We do take some, I can throw some super chat questions at Evan if anyone has any. Otherwise, we might have time for a few just general questions if someone wants to, if you guys have any you want to throw in the chat. Maybe while we wait for those to roll in, Evan, if people want to keep up with your work, where can they do that?
Yep. So we're on BlueSky at anti-hate.ca, all one word. Our website, antihate.ca. We have a newsletter that'll keep you up to date on some of the articles that we publish. And we'd love a few more subscribers. That'd be great if you'd like to follow our work.
Yeah, you guys should definitely subscribe. Okay, great. I don't think we have any questions right now. So we'll probably leave it there for today. Thank you so much for being my guinea pig with this first live episode. I am so excited to be doing this format. It was really fun and hopefully engaging for you guys too. And as always, these episodes will be posted for you to listen to later as well. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week at 12 p.m. Eastern for our next episode. And Evan, thank you again so much for joining me on Bubble Pop.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go touch grass and have a nice weekend. I hope you do too.
That sounds amazing. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Bubble Pop. I'm Rachel Gilmore, your least favorite person's least favorite journalist. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing on YouTube, Patreon, Substack, or wherever you like to listen. You can also find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, and BlueSky. I'd like to give a special thank you to Hans Vivian Wenzel for making the incredibly groovy music for Bubble Pop. You can find more of his stuff on Spotify under the artist name Hans. That's a lowercase h with an exclamation mark. Thank you again for spending spending this time with me. This is my dream job. I know I say that every week, but that's because it's true every week. And I couldn't do it for 1 second without your support. So thank you. And I'll see you next time.